Either attend your sister's wedding or forget about college. My father's message appeared on my phone at 6:14 that morning. At first, I thought he was joking. Then he called. "You heard me," he said. "Your sister comes first. If you don't support her wedding, we're cutting off your tuition immediately." What he didn't know was that I hadn't needed their tuition money for almost a year. What he didn't know is that while they were busy treating my sister like royalty, I had quietly graduated at the top of my class. And what he definitely didn't know was that my first job offer paid more than both my parents earned combined. But I said none of that. Instead, I simply replied, "Okay." 3 weeks later, I walked into my sister's wedding reception. Within 30 minutes, my father would publicly regret everything he had said. And for the first time, the truth would finally come out. My name is Madison Parker, and I was 23 years old when my father threatened to cut off my tuition over my sister's wedding. That sentence probably sounds ridiculous. At the time, it felt completely normal. Because in my family, everything revolved around my older sister, Chloe. Chloe was the golden child, the star, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. Growing up, I learned there were different rules for each of us. When Chloe got average grades, my parents celebrated. When I brought home top scores, they said, "That's expected." When Chloe won a local dance competition, they threw a party. When I received a statewide academic scholarship, they barely mentioned it. At some point, I stopped expecting recognition. It was easier that way. Instead, I focused on building my future. I attended one of the best universities in the state. Scholarships covered most of my expenses. My parents contributed some money toward tuition, but far less than people assumed. By my senior year, I was balancing classes with a demanding internship at a technology company. The internship wasn't glamorous. Long hours, tough projects, constant pressure. But I loved it. Then Chloe got engaged. From that moment forward, the wedding became the center of the universe. Every conversation, every weekend, every family gathering. Nothing else mattered. My parents spent months planning expensive events, bridal showers, venue visits, decoration meetings. Eventually, they started expecting me to help. At first, I did. But as graduation approached, my schedule became impossible. I declined several wedding-related requests because I had exams, interviews, and internship responsibilities. My parents didn't take it well. "You always make everything about yourself," my mother complained. I stayed quiet. Arguing never changed anything. 3 weeks before the wedding, my father called. His voice was already angry when I answered. "You need to attend every remaining wedding event." "Dad, I have obligations." "No," he snapped. "You have a family." Then came the ultimatum. "If you don't support your sister properly, we're cutting off your tuition." For a moment, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because he had no idea. What neither of my parents knew was that I had already graduated months earlier. Not only that, I had finished first in my program. A week before his phone call, I had accepted a position with one of the fastest-growing technology firms in the country. The salary was life-changing, but I said none of that. Instead, I simply replied, "Okay, Dad." Then I hung up and quietly agreed to attend the wedding. The wedding took place on a warm Saturday afternoon in June. The venue was exactly the kind of place Chloe had always dreamed about. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers everywhere, a ballroom overlooking a lake. Everything looked perfect, and Chloe made sure everyone knew it. From the moment I arrived, I felt like an afterthought. My parents barely greeted me. They were too busy managing details and making sure Chloe remained the center of attention. Honestly, I preferred it that way. I took my seat quietly and watched the ceremony. The reception afterward was where things became interesting. At first, everything followed the usual pattern. Guests praised Chloe's dress, praised the decorations, praised my parents for organizing such an extravagant event. Then several relatives started asking me questions. "So, Madison, what's next after college?" Before I could answer, my father jumped in. "She's still figuring things out." A few people nodded politely. My mother added, "She's always been a little independent." The way she said it made it sound like a problem. I smiled and said nothing. The less I explained, the better. About an hour later, I was standing near the dessert table when I heard a familiar voice. Madison? I turned around. Standing there was Daniel Foster, the senior executive who had supervised my internship. Beside him stood Karen Whitmore, one of the company's directors. My eyes widened. What are you doing here? Daniel laughed. The groom's uncle is one of our clients. We exchanged greetings. Then Karen smiled. We were just telling people how proud we are of you. I immediately knew where this was heading. Unfortunately, so did fate. A group of nearby guests overheard her. Proud of what? Someone asked. Karen looked surprised. You mean nobody told you? The crowd grew curious. Daniel answered before I could stop him. Madison graduated first in her class. Several heads turned. My parents looked confused. Then Karen continued. And she accepted one of the most competitive positions in our company. The room suddenly became much quieter. Someone asked what the role paid. Daniel politely avoided exact numbers. But his next statement was enough. Let's just say she's going to have an incredible career. Questions started flying from every direction. Guests wanted details. Relatives wanted explanations. Even Chloe looked distracted. Then my father stepped forward. For the first time all evening, he seemed genuinely stunned. Wait, he said slowly. You already graduated? I looked directly at him and calmly nodded. The expression on his face told me he was finally realizing how little he actually knew about my life. For several seconds, nobody said anything. The music continued playing in the background. Servers carried trays between tables. But the atmosphere inside the reception had completely changed. People weren't talking about Chloe's wedding anymore. They were talking about me. Questions came from every direction. When did you graduate? What company hired you? Why didn't anyone mention this? I could feel my parents becoming increasingly uncomfortable, especially my father. He stood there staring at me like he was trying to reconcile two completely different versions of his daughter. Finally, one of my aunts asked the question everyone was thinking. Why have we never heard about any of this? The room grew quiet. I took a slow breath. Then I answered honestly. Because nobody ever asked. That landed harder than I expected. My mother lowered her eyes. My father looked away. For years, every conversation in our family had centered around Chloe. Her accomplishments, her relationships, her goals. Meanwhile, I learned to keep my own victories private. Not out of bitterness. Out of necessity. I stopped chasing approval a long time ago. My father cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us? I offered a small smile. Would it have mattered? He didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew the truth. The issue had never been information. The issue had always been attention. Several relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had witnessed the favoritism for years. Nobody needed an explanation. My mother finally spoke. We underestimated you. I nodded. I know. Nearby, Chloe looked frustrated as conversations continued drifting away from her wedding. Ironically, I wasn't trying to steal attention. I never had been. I simply stopped hiding when people asked direct questions. My father stepped closer. What about the tuition? For the first time all evening, I laughed softly. Dad, your ultimatum didn't have any power. His face immediately turned red. I wasn't mocking him, just stating a fact. I graduated months ago. Silence. Again. Then I continued. The support helped, and I'm grateful for it. But my future was never dependent on that threat. Nobody argued, because there was nothing to argue about. The reception eventually returned to normal. Guests went back to celebrating. Music resumed. People danced. As for me, I left early. Not angry. Not resentful. Just free. Walking toward my car, I realized something important. Success feels different when it isn't used to prove people wrong. It feels better when it proves you never needed their permission to succeed in the first place. And that was the chapter one was finally ready to begin.